Hi, everyone. First of all, before I start, I would like to thank Stan, Justin, and everyone at HitLab for having me today in this summit. And very excited to share with you our story, our digital transformation story in a 157-year-old company. My name is Melissa Saw. I have been in life sciences close to 20 years and with Bayer 15 years across, different roles and different countries. I've done digital transformation for the past 5 years, and currently I have pivoted to procurement. So without further ado, let me just start the presentation. So first of all, I wanted to actually share with you a growing macroeconomic issue that is actually bestowed upon us, which is aging world population that is growing as well. Why I wanted to share with you, because I wanted to actually have some perspective about this, because it actually has a domino effect of what we're going to talk about, which is digital health. And as well, at the end of my presentation, I will tie together with you how we are actually moving the needle in Bayer as a whole company. And last but not least, to talk about our social engagement in the AI space here. So now back to this one. I've done actually some research here to provide you some context. So when we look about a world population that's growing and aging, we have 83 million people per year on planet Earth. And in a short time span by 2050, that will reach a staggering number of 10 billion. And out of that, 2 billion people are actually 60 years and above. Now, why I'm actually putting the spotlight in this age group? Because they are the ones that are the higher risk to get affected by diseases such as you see in front of you, which is cardiovascular, chronic diabetes, and so on and so forth. So have that in the back of your mind, because all these actually forms the basis of what I will share with you later. So I wanted to actually touch upon this as well. Data and technology actually forms a very important things, because when we're in Bayer, we think that it is very important to look into the data, science, and technology as a convergence, because all these are interlinking, which is holding the key to better solutions for health here. For your information, back in 2017, we actually had something called Digital Agenda, whereby we have identified 5 commonalities across the different businesses that we have in the organization. And data as an asset is actually one of the 5 that propels kind of like a basis that forms the digital transformation enablers that actually helps the business. So like I said, data as an asset is one of them, people is second, processes is third, fourth is partnership, and last but not least is platform and solution and technology here. So back into data here, I did some research here because I was just curious to see how much data that we actually create on a daily basis. And it came to like 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. Well, I myself have no idea how many numbers quintillion is. And I Googled it, it actually came out to 18 zeros behind this. And I myself am guilty, because from the moment I am awake, the first thing that I reach to is my cell phone, right? My smart devices. But on top of that, we actually have a lot of devices back home that actually feeds into this data creation here. So cell phone, tablet, camera, fitness trackers, drones, and all these actually contributes to this big number that you're seeing in front of you. Now, the next one I wanted to actually share with you here, because the next question is, because like, great, data as an asset is important. We have created all this data, but I want you to actually come back into this journey and to share with you in Bayer what types of data sets that we actually create or gather in Bayer, and what do we do with them, right? So just to give you a high level example, we have 3 different businesses. So we have our crop science business, pharmaceutical, as well as consumer health. So if you think from that perspective, data can come in various forms. And one of them, say a pharmaceutical, the data that comes in from third-party clinical research data that we have, our production plan information from product supply, and also like our marketing and sales campaign from a consumer health. So all these are different data that we actually collect in the company. So what does it actually lead to? You can see 3 points in front of you, but let me touch on the second one here, which is data and digital technologies lead to a more efficient production in digital factories. Now, what it actually means here is back in 2017, the World Economic Forum has actually acknowledged one of our factory in Gabagnata in Italy as the factory as a smart factory. So what we piloted back then is we equipped the frontliners in the factory with a wearable device, but also a Google Glass, because they could actually see or have information right in front of them, as opposed to very labor and manual, very kind of like traditional setting of how we used to run production here. And one example that I can share with you, for example, if one of the belt, say, is malfunctioning, we could seamlessly switch into another belt within seconds or minutes, because we'll be able to see all this information from the Google Glass here. So you can actually, change your resources to another belt here, whereby it would not only have a seamless production, but it would not disrupt production. As opposed in previous time, you don't have technology to actually assist you in this. The person actually has to go about the entire factory to look for the production manager. And then the production manager actually has to search all this information and data that he has to look up for free space on where they can actually continue production here. And hence, as you can see, everything is a domino effect. And that's why it's so efficient and effective to have data and digital to actually propel production in our product supply here. Now, two things here about digital transformation. The first thing is, when we talk about digital transformation, many people have very different definitions of what digital transformation is. Personally, I am just seeing digital as a capability or an enabler of how we actually do things on a day-to-day basis. It can be in the form of a website, a platform, a device, right? It's just as simple as that. And this actually brings me to my first point here. It says digital transformation is the core of our value chain. So what it means is actually doing digital in today's world, like digital marketing, right? You're doing digital you're doing marketing in a digital world here. So it's just how we actually incorporate digital in our everyday life. The second thing here is it actually has the propensity to develop a new business model. When we talk about pharmaceutical here, the model has actually shifted from volume-based pricing to value-based pricing. Volume-based simply means how many pills that you manage to sell, and that's where authorities or payers actually puts a dollar and a number on it, but it's actually more than that. Now, the payers are actually looking in terms of what you can bring onto the table, we meaning the life science, the companies that actually develops the molecule here. So you're talking about things like extra patient support program, nurses program, e-health or quality of life. So all these are actually taken into consideration now, and what we are looking beyond the pill, as we say. Now, moving on here, I would like to share with you some very concrete examples of things that we're doing in our digital health space in our pharmaceutical business. So three things here is, first thing is, how does it actually help to increase the diagnosis rate here? Second thing of all, precision medicine. And last but not least is the development of our drug discovery here in R&D organization. So when we talk about the early diagnosis of the disease, I would like to actually bring to your attention in terms of rare disease, right, which is CTEP. Now, CTEP is actually a chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. It's a very niche disease that affects only around 500 to 2,500 patients in the US yearly. And unfortunately, it only boils down to the patient's luck having to find the right doctor who knows how to actually, detect this disease in the first place. Because as I understand, this disease is actually very complex and challenging. So what we're currently doing in Bayer is we are coming up with a pattern recognition software that uses deep learning in terms of assisting the radiologists into looking into the CT scan here with the help of them, detecting the disease much earlier and to improve the diagnosis rate. So these are some of the examples of what we're doing in this space. Second thing, when I talk about precision medicine here, Precision medicine is actually a form of medicine that uses genetic information to treat a disease. So the intent here is to target a specific genetic profile independent of the tumor site here. An example here is a very specific example in terms of a TRK fusion cancer. So this cancer actually affects both adults and children in various frequencies and various tumor types. It can affect your lung, your breast, your colorectal, your colon, and stuff like that. So that's why it is so important to cast a wide net when we're doing broad testing of this mutation here, because it is very important so that the doctor, the physician, knows to identify patients with this fusion cancer and to be able to prescribe a targeted therapy that will be able to assist this patient in combating this disease here. Now, the last example that I want to share with you in this R&D space here, when we talk about clinical trials, I'm sure it runs to your head, and then you know this, right? It actually is a very time-consuming and is also very expensive exercise, because as you can see from the slide, only 1% of it actually makes out to commercialization. If you're talking about the late-stage clinical trial, you need at least 10,000 patients, $500,000, and it takes around 3 to 5 years to complete this before you can move on to commercialization. So as you can see, it is very expensive, it's time-consuming here, and what are we doing in this space? So first of all, I can share with you that we have working with a Budapest company, which is a startup that we have discovered in part of our accelerator program called Grants for Apps, or G4A. So what Turbine actually does is it builds an artificial intelligence that models how cancer works on a molecular level that enables it to run millions of experiments within minutes in silico, meaning computing, with the power of computing. And this is actually very different of how things used to be done. You know, it used to be very labor intensive. You have your researchers writing the lab code, going into the labs, looking into their microscopes and doing, you know, the tests slowly but surely. But think of COVID, right? Whereby when quarantine and when with the height, when the peak of COVID, and it's not so easy to actually move around physically, let alone going to a lab, carrying on these experiments. And hence, this was actually dampen or affect the R&D exercise that we're trying to do here. But with this actually technology, we'll be able to do this with the power of computing. So that's one. The second thing is, let's talk about decentralizing clinical trial. So our R&D team is actually putting the patients in the core of this. What it actually means is we're bringing clinical trials to patients and not vice versa. We're equipping them with actually a wearable device whereby they can be recruited in the comfort of their own home. They don't have to take time off work. They don't have to have out of pocket to travel to a certain institution and sit hours to actually conduct that part of the recruitment for the clinical trials here. So in that, we're actually foreseeing that will improve the rate by recruitment of 40% as opposed to a traditional setup. But at the same time, as well as our data collection, we'll be able to see any anomalies, you know, to have data much quicker as opposed to a traditional setting here. So these are just some examples of what we're currently doing in the pharmaceutical space in digital health. And the next question that I've actually inserted this as part of the presentation today is, I have a lot of questions in terms of how, kind of like logistically, of how we do this in Bayer, because we have 100,000 employees across many, many countries, and we're a global organization, and it's actually easier said than done. So just to give you a bit of a glimpse into how we do things in Bayer is, when we do digital transformation, we don't do it in silos, meaning we are actually working hand in hand, as you can see, with our businesses. So we are pivoting digital transformation globally, but also at the same time, parallel, we actually are enabling the businesses to actually run with their own digital roadmap, their strategies, and their resources as we speak. So maybe to actually give you a bit more information here, what we did is we, in a high level management, we have set up a digital transformation board. as the name suggests, right, it actually consists of the three division board members, the businesses, but we also have our CIO and our CFO as part of this advisory board that moves things on a group-wide initiative when it comes to digital transformation. So topics such as training, such as people, talent, and skill set that's required to propel digital transformation are being discussed hand in hand together in this forum. And of course, we have our IT and digital expert as part of this team as well. But at the same time, like I've shared with you, business as usual from the three different businesses, because of different maturity, different portfolio, and different customers, that they actually run in parallel as well. So this is actually how we do digital transformation in Bayer. And I wanted to actually end with a very interesting topic that might be of interest to you. When we talk about AI here, it's of course very promising and exciting, if you can see, for how we adopt this technology in the digital health space, like I shared with you earlier. But like every scenario here, there's always two sides of the coin, right? The negative aspects has caused a lot of concern here. So some examples or issues such as accidents involving self-driving cars, right? Social scoring in China, personal data being hacked or stolen from databases of big organizations, social media companies, all like causes a worrying effect here. So we actually take it very seriously in Bayer. So what we're doing here is I wanted to share with you in terms of how we are looking holistically to maximize the benefits of AI, but at the same time to minimize its risk as a community here. So what we're engaging in Bayer is the social debate about AI. As part of it, we are a member of a high-level expert group for AI in the European Commission. So this actually consists of subject matter experts from different industries in EU. So we actually represent healthcare. So Bayer actually sits as a member of the committee. So this committee has actually came up with an ethical framework that can guide the wider AI community in providing you guidance in terms how to use AI responsibly as a community here. So as you can see here, they address in the report whereby you are more than happy to go Google and download them. This report has been available since April 2019. It's called the Trustworthy AI Report, and it touches many important aspects that you can see in front of you. So the expert group has also developed an assessment list that is currently being tested. Bayer is actually part of this use case here from the fusion cancer that I've actually talked about earlier. So I hope that you have managed to get a glimpse of how we run digital transformation in Bayer. Thank you for your attention here. I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have. So over back to you, HitLab.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much again for joining us. As you just saw, we had a presentation about how a 157-year-old life science company is advancing digital, led by Melissa Saw, Global Digital Director of Bayer. She'll now be joining us live to answer any questions that you might have added to the chat, and she'll be with us for a few minutes. So if you still have questions, please feel free to add them here in the discussion down below. I'd like to also briefly introduce Melissa before we get started. While at Bayer, she had held previous positions in sales, marketing, and now in digital transformation. She has worked and lived across Malaysia, Australia, Germany, Switzerland, and is now based in the United States. She graduated from Charles Sturt University, Australia, with a Bachelor of Business and Finance, and holds a Master's of Business Administration in Marketing from the Australian Institute of Business. Please join me in welcoming Melissa. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Justin. Oh, it's doesn't feel like the same thing, right? To be replicated in a live event, but the setting that you have is very close, I have to say. I'm very impressed.
Oh, thank you. And thank you very much for your time and for your presentation. I'm sure our audience really appreciated that. If we may, we'd love to just dive right into some of the questions that we're getting right now.
Sure, yeah.
I have here from Michael. Michael is asking, how does Bayer address the issue of recording when patients actually took their medication? So medication adherence. And they're asking, is Bayer considering things like smart packaging to achieve that?
Yeah, so we have actually trial smart packaging But the purpose of what we're doing that is more from a distribution side, production side, like cold chain products, just to make sure that the quality and the time to the hospitals and the time to the cold chain is all set in terms of the temperature and the quality. But in terms of Michael question, I think he's more looking into patient adherence. Commercially, I know we're piloting it, nothing commercial out there yet, but I know that we are looking into that space more from a consumer health perspective. But I've actually spoken about the clinical trial side. So that one, yes, we are recording it because it's a clinical trial setting. We have equipped them with the Rebel device that I've actually mentioned in the presentation. So in a trial setting, yes, but commercially, global wide, we have not have anything on that space yet, Justin. Yeah.
Well, it's very exciting. And thank you for giving us a sneak peek into the clinical trial space there at Bayer. Really appreciate that as well. We have another question here from the audience. We know you talked a little bit about Turbine during your presentation and your partnership with them. Can you give us a little bit more insight on how do startups explore partnerships and collaborations with Bayer?
Yeah, so we have the Grants for Apps, which is kind of like an accelerator program within our pharmaceutical business. So Grant for Apps we give out, as the name suggests, grants, but we also give out pre-COVID like office workspace. We give out C-suite level support and stuff like that. So we run like a challenge for the startup community based on a challenge that the business actually have. So sometimes it's heart failure, sometimes ophthalmology. So every year is different, and we actually invite the startup community to be part of that. So first of all, this is how we have the link between big pharma as well as startup through the Grants for Apps. But of course, we are very active in this space. Apart from the program that I've actually mentioned, there are a lot of different pockets within the different businesses that we have in pharma, consumer, as well as ag. We have a team that actively goes and scout in terms of the latest, brightest technology, the latest trend out there, and to see how we could work together with startups to pilot new business model or new solution. So yeah, these are just some of the ways that we have here.
Thank you, Melissa. And I think this point actually raises another point, which is that in this age of COVID and this age of working at home and in the home office, it's becoming increasingly more challenging to make connections. And now that we're divided by this screen here. Do you have any tips or suggestions for our innovators in the audience? How can they make a greater effort to connect with investors, client partners, and other people in the space that they might be looking to connect with?
So at the first one, well, especially in the US when COVID really was at the peak in New York area was around March. So at that time, I was really struggling because, as you know, events were canceled or postponed. But now, sad to say, it's already more than 6 months. But I think that the new normal now, and especially people like you, Justin, right? And a lot of like event organizers are like, they pivot really fast and really creative. So I would say business as usual, the meetup that you used to go, all the events that you used to go, you can't actually go in person, but all of them have actually pivoted to a virtual platform. So it's business as usual. I would say, of course, it's more effort just because you have to sit in front of the screen now, but you can also take your time to move around and stuff like that. I have not done anything differently. I just actually attended and marked the meetings that I wanted to go to. But every time when I go to some event, I tell myself I have to make at least one new contact, right? Be it with the chair. Like I'm very privileged, and I was in a speaking appearance or in panel, I make that contacts with different speakers, but also questions that comes on board as well. Sometimes I follow up with those questions, and LinkedIn is actually a very good platform for us to have the post-event touch points as well. So I'd say business as usual. Always have one maybe aim in mind to meet at least one new people, at least learn one new thing, right? When you go to an event here.
That's incredible. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. And before we conclude, just a couple quick questions. What books have you been reading, and what have you been doing in quarantine to keep yourself sane?
Okay, I am guilty. I have been binging on Netflix. Okay, so not necessarily book. I'm so sorry here if it's the wrong audience, but I'm just absolutely crazy about The Crown now. Season 4, it's about Princess Diana and Prince Charles and Camilla Parker. So I'm a bit crazy about royalty. So that's my guilty pleasure for during quarantine, Justin. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So in addition to all of the updates from Bayer, now we know Melissa's guilty pleasure is The Crown on Netflix. So please get over to your nearest device and start streaming if you haven't started already. Melissa, I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for the presentation. We really appreciate having Bayer as a knowledge partner at the 2020 Innovator Summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, HitLab, and thank you for everyone. Yeah. See you later.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much to our audience. I want to remind you that we'll be having a session coming up in just 4 minutes time. Our next session is going to be the age of COVID-19, telehealth adoption, a mind genomics attitudinal study. And that'll be starting in just a couple minutes. We'll be taking a very, very short break, and we'll be joining back at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you then. Thank you very much.